Today we are going to look at measuring a segment. So the distance between any 2 points is the absolute value of the difference of the coordinates. Okay, remember that absolute value is the distance from 0. So that means that your answer will always be positive. Remember that absolute value, when we write it in an expression, it looks like bars around it. So if I had 1 minus 5, we're taking the absolute value of it. So again, these on the outside are absolute value bars. We would say 1 minus 5 is a negative 4, but we were taking the absolute value of that, meaning the distance from 0 is 4. So today, if you type in or write a negative answer, just know it's wrong. All your answers today will be positive. So if you have a negative answer today, you need to go back and double check your work. Every answer today is positive because we are talking about distance. And when we're talking about distance, it doesn't matter whether you're going forwards or backwards. You are traveling that distance. And it is always positive. On our first one, we are looking at the length of segment KM. So K is at 1, and M is at 3.5 or 3.5. And we're taking the difference of them, meaning we are subtracting, and we're taking the absolute value of the difference. So 1 minus 3.5 is a negative 2.5. Remember, we're taking the absolute value of that, meaning our distance from 0 is 2.5. And I know that may be confusing to you as to why it's distance from 0, but it's an actual distance. And if you did like you would have done in elementary school and skip counted, 1, 2, and we don't go the full length, so it's just a half. On our next one, we are looking at the length of EF. E is at negative 4, F is at negative 1. So we're taking negative 4 minus a negative 1, and we're taking the absolute value of that. So negative 4 minus a negative 1, remember a minus a negative changes to positive. So negative 4 plus 1 is a negative 3, but we're taking the absolute value of that. So our length or our distance is 3. So again, if you haven't noticed, I've been saying distance is the same thing as length. Also, for those of you who are wondering why there's no symbol over this EF, it's because when there is no symbol over top of that segment, you are talking about the measurement of that segment. So that's why there's no symbol over that. So when you're naming it, I need the symbol for the segment or for you to write the word segment. But when we are measuring it, there's no symbol over top because it tells us that we are showing a length. Next up, the segment addition postulate. So we have segment here. segment AC. And B is in between segment A and C. Notice I didn't say in the middle, I said between. Doesn't mean, because between doesn't mean that it has to be right at the halfway point. It just has to be somewhere along that segment. So when that happens, we know that our two parts, AB and BC, add together and equal AC. So this is part plus part equals whole. So if AB was 1 and BC was 2, this whole thing for AC would be 3, because our part plus our part equals our whole. Our next examples say to use the segment addition postulate, what we just talked about, part plus part equals whole, to solve, and if we don't have a picture, we need to draw a picture. So we have B, point B is between point A and C. The length of AC equals 14, and the length of BC equals 11.4. Find the length of AB. So we have a segment that we need to draw. And B is between A and C. So that means that A and C are endpoints. B is somewhere along that segment. We know that the length of AC, so this whole thing, is 14. We know that the length of BC, this, is 11.4. And we are looking for the length of AB. So when we're looking for something that is X, and I want you to set up an equation every time for these. Again, it's part plus part equals whole. So we have X plus 11.4 equals 14. Because we added our two smaller parts and it equals the entire larger segment. And then we can solve for X. So if you need to, draw a line down your equal sign. And we have something with X. It's at 11.4, so that means we need to do something with it. And we need to subtract it from both sides. So we have 2.6 for X. And because we had labeled that as our length for AB, that means that AB equals 2.6. The length of AB is 2.6. Our next question. We have point S is between points R and T. Find the length of RT. And we already have our picture. So again, you take your two parts and set it equal to your whole. So 2x plus 7 plus 28 equals 4x. Because two smaller things add together every time and equal your larger part. Again, draw your line down the middle if you need it. And what are we going to do now? We're going to combine our like terms. So 2x plus 35 equals 4x. What are we going to do now? We're going to subtract 2x from both sides. So we've got 35 equaling 2x. And now what are we going to do? Divide by 2 on both sides. So we have 35 halves equaling x. Now I really would like you to get comfortable with fractions this year, because there are going to be times where if you change your answer to a decimal and then do what we're going to do next, substitute, you will get the wrong answer. So please use a fraction when it's possible, because we still need to find RT. And notice that RT was this whole thing, and our whole thing was 4x. Now, I know some of you are going to say, oh, I got my answer, RT equals 4x. And you're going to get it wrong, because it asks what is the length of RT. You have to substitute that 35 halves in 4x. So we have 4 times 35 over 2. And that equals 70. And that is our answer for this problem. Next up, we're going to talk about congruent segments. So remember that congruent means same size and shape. And these are both segments, so there's the same shape, and the same size means that they are the same length. So we have the length of PQ equals length of RS, which tells us that these segments are congruent. So remember that our symbol for congruent is that equal sign with a squiggly line over top. Now, in this class, we show that 2 segments are congruent with tick marks. Now, notice there's 1 on each of these. If we had another set of segments, say A, B, C, D, and they had 2 markings on them, that would tell us that segment AB is congruent to segment CD, but they have 2 segments on them instead of 1. That means segment AB and segment PQ are not congruent, just like segment CD and segment RS are not congruent because one has 1 tick mark, one has 2 tick marks. Then we have a midpoint. A midpoint of a segment bisects or divides a segment into 2 congruent segments. So a midpoint, just like what it sounds like, it's at the halfway point. It's right in the middle. So anytime you see this word bisects, it is the same as saying it's at your midpoint. It's at the halfway point. So anytime you have this, you know that your 2 parts are equal. So our example for this is that if M is the midpoint of segment AB, so we have a segment, endpoints are A and B, and M is right smack dab in the middle. means we know that these two parts are congruent. So let's say that they are 2 and 2. That tells us that the length of AM equals the length of BM. It also tells us that those segments are congruent. We also know, still, the segment additional postulate, that the length of AM plus the length of MB is going to still equal the length of AB. So 2 plus 2 is 4, and that is the length of this whole segment AB. A segment bisector is any raised segment or a line that intersects a segment at its midpoint. So it's the same kind of thing as this midpoint, but instead of just being a point, it is a ray segment or a line that is going through that segment. Okay, our next examples use the midpoints to find lengths and draw a figure. So we have point B is the midpoint of segment AC. AB equals 5x, BC equals 3x plus 4. Find the length of AB. So again, we need to draw a segment. And what are my endpoints? A and C. Where does B go? On this one, it does go in the middle because it says midpoint. Make sure you're reading today. Midpoint tells us a lot. It tells us that these segments are congruent, so I can put tick marks on them and remind myself that those two things are equal. Then we know that the length of AB is 5x. The length of BC is 3x plus 4. So, again, we know that those two things are equal, so we can set them equal to each other. So 5x equals 3x plus 4, and then we can solve for x. If you need to put your line down the middle, go ahead and do so. And then what would we do? We would subtract 3x from both sides. So we have 2x equals 4. And what would happen next? We would divide both sides by 2. And x equals 2. Are we finished? No, because it asked us to find the length of AB. So we need to figure out the length of AB. Now in our problem it said that AB equals 5x. Do not tell me this is your answer. It is not. You were asked to find the length of it, which means a number. So we need to substitute that 2 in for x. So 5 times 2 is 10. That is your answer. Our next one, if point K is the midpoint of segment LM, LK equals 8 and LM equals 2x plus 9, find x. What do we need to do first? for those of you who are telling me to set up an equation, I do not recommend doing that. You need to make sure that you are drawing your figure. And what should we be drawing? We should be drawing a segment. And what are the endpoints of this segment? L and M. Where does that K go? Exactly in the middle, because we have a midpoint. And because we have a midpoint, what else can we mark? Those tick marks to remind us that those two sides are equal to each other. Now we know LK is 8. And we know that LM is 2x plus 9. Now I've got a question. What about KM? We didn't get any information about it. Oh, wait, we did. And why did we get information? Because of midpoint. What is on the one side is also on the other. So this is also 8. So now we can set up our equation. Remember, part plus part equals whole. So 8 plus 8 equals 2x plus 9. What would we do now? Yes, we would combine our like terms. So 8 plus 8 is 16 equals 2x plus 9. If you need to draw that line through the middle, go ahead and do so. What would we do now? We're going to subtract that 9 from both sides. So we have 7 equals 2x. Divide by 2 on both sides. So x equals 7/2. Is that my answer? It actually is this time, because it just asked us to find x. Okay, now we're going to review a little bit from yesterday. We want to use our figure to name each of the following. And for, I believe, all of these, there's more than one answer. So on the first one, we want to name one line. Okay, remember to name a line. You have to have 2 points on the same line, not 3 points. So it's 2 points that you're looking for. You could say a line KL. You could have also said line KJ, line IL, line IH. Then we are looking to name one segment. For those of you who are saying 3 letters, again, segments are named with 2 points. So again, we could have KL. What needs to be in front? Yes, you have to write segment in front. So segment KL. Again, make sure that those letters are capitalized and print if you are writing them by hand. And make sure that those points are capitalized. Next up, name the ray opposite of ray Li. So for those of you who can't see, this is an arrow pointing over I. So ray opposite of ray Li. So we need to go in the opposite direction. So please do not tell me ray Lk. And do not tell me ray HL. That's going in the same direction as what we're going. You have to start at the same letter. So we have ray L H. And then our last one, we want to name 3 collinear points. What could we say? K, L, and J. You could have also said points I, L, and H.